Well, you can look at this two ways. It's midwinter, it's cold, it's morning, there's a frost on the black wattle behind me, and you can think, oh, what a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world. Or you may be doing it tough. And what that means is, maybe you had no heating overnight, maybe you were homeless, maybe you couldn't turn the heating off because you had to juggle expenses. And that's what doing it tough is. Doing it tough is an Australian synonym for basically not having enough to meet your everyday commitments. Now, it's a popular term. We see it used more and more in the media, and we even see our dear leader, dear opposition leader, I should say, what a faux pas, talking about people doing it tough, and the Prime Minister talking about people doing it tough, and the charities talking about people doing it tough, and the media, and again and again and again. It's all very well talking about why people are doing it tough, especially in this country, a sovereign nation state on a continent of 26 million people, and we've got significant sections of the population doing it tough, especially during winter. So you really have to ask yourself, what has gone wrong in the land of milk and honey, the land of opportunity, the land of fair go, when there are so many people doing it tough? Not just the 1/3 of the population, which is about 6 to 7 million, who survive on social security benefits, whether it's old age pensions, disability support pensions, student allowance, single parents benefits. It's not just them. But now we have the concept of the working poor. What that means is people maybe work, maybe two people in a partnership, in a relationship, maybe working at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month. There's really not enough income coming in to meet all their commitments, and they're doing it tough. When you wouldn't expect people who are involved in wage slavery, and that's what the wage system is, doing it tough, because the whole purpose of getting a wage in a capitalist society, it's a society based on private investment for private profit, is to be able to meet your commitments. So let's look at this. Let's look at this situation. We're in a country of billionaires, a country which has an extraordinary productive agricultural sector which exports to the rest of the world, a country which exports natural resources around the world, whether it's traditional resources like oil and gas and gold and silver and platinum, or the more recent developments, bauxite, iron ore, uranium, and the list goes on and on. Why are so many people doing it tough? Is it because people are lazy and they don't want to work? Is it because somehow we have upset the gods? Or is it more fundamental? Is it the type of political system we have? The type of social system, the type of culture we've developed? And the culture in a settler society, is a society which has been built on the blood and bones of First Nations people around the world, including this country. Culture is basically about economics. It's about acquiring wealth. It's about exploiting those around you in order to acquire that wealth. It's about ensuring the institutions which are created in order to look after the interests of the majority are subverted by ever shrinking minority. And that's what we find in Australia in the 21st century. 150 years ago, in the 1860s, the 1870s, the 1880s, Australia had the highest rate of home ownership in the world. The gains that the trade union movement, which began in the 1820s, had made had been significant. And in terms of political rights, in terms of being able to be involved in the decision-making processes, Australia was first around the world. People living in the Australian colonies had rights which people living in the motherland, England, didn't have for another 50 years. So what's happened to the land where millions flocked to in order to make their fortunes, to create a secure environment? What has happened? Well, we are victims. In many regards, we're victims of our own stupidity. And what I mean by that is, to a significant degree, the great majority of people in this country have believed that the way forward is through a private investment for private profit mantra. We believe that if we give people power, they'll do the right things by us. Forgetting the lessons of history, and the lessons of history are very simple. Everything you enjoy today has been created through the blood, sweat and tears of the people that have come before you. Everything. Whether it's the wage system, whether it's the social security system, whether it's a universal healthcare system, whether it's a universal healthcare, universal national disability insurance scheme, and the list goes on and on. Everything came through struggle, through direct action as well as parliamentary action. And we have allowed the very institutions which make the laws, which determine how wealth is created and how wealth is distributed, to be subverted by a shrinking number of people in this country. Today, the bottom 50%, as far as economic return is concerned, own 1% of the wealth, while the top 1% own over 50% of the wealth in this country. Extraordinary figures. Extraordinary figures when you think about it. And what we've seen over the last 50 years is the acceleration of this process of wealth and power being concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And this has occurred because, as a people, we have supported the deregulation of the economy. We have supported privatisation, believing the public is bad and private is good. We have supported globalisation, allowing jobs, resources to be developed overseas. And we have allowed corporatisation. We're the only country in the Western world that does not have any significant laws regarding forcing large corporations to be broken down. So although we champion capitalism, we have forgotten the ultimate endpoint of a capitalist society where there are no regulations, where Parliament has minimal power to intervene in the marketplace or refuses to intervene in the marketplace, where we ask government to stand aside when it comes to businesses making a profit, then we find ourselves in this situation. Think about it. Why is a country that is so rich talks about doing it tough? Why are so many people, not just those on social security benefits doing it tough? Now, I never use the word welfare except corporate welfare. A social security benefit or a social security system is a contract. It's a contract between the state and those in a society who, through no fault of their own, or through their own fault, are not able to take care of themselves and need support. And the contract is very simple. The state provides the basic necessities. Those that receive a social security benefit behave themselves. They don't riot, they don't revolt. They don't create organisations which challenge the status quo. Let's look at the situation. We theoretically live in a democratic society, in a parliamentary democracy. At the federal level every 3 years, and at the state level every 4 years, we're marched off to the ballot box, where we give a representative a signed blank cheque to make decisions for us for the next 3 to 4 years. And if you're wondering what a cheque is, just look at your digital wallet. It's like giving the PIN number to your digital wallet to somebody on trust, somebody you don't know, a representative. And most of these representatives are members of political party specific ideological pursuits, which don't provide the maximum benefit for the maximum number, but provide the maximum benefit for a shrinking minority. So no wonder, in a period when so many are doing it tough, we don't see any significant legislation being driven through Parliament to resolve these issues. And when legislation is proposed, the fourth estate in its various guises, was the legacy media or the virtual platforms, go into overdrive opposing anything, any legislation, no matter how small, which benefits the population, which benefits the majority. We are in this situation because we, as a people, have allowed it to occur. So I could go on and on and on and on, talking about the inequalities, the growing inequality, the growing gap between the rich and poor, why so many people find themselves in this particular situation today. But what we should be talking about, looking at, thinking about, is ways to overcome this issue. And it's not going to be easy. We created public interest before corporate interests in 2015, a handful of us, in order to broach this issue. And the support has been definitely silent. Most people can't even envisage the possibility that change is possible. Incorporated into the system through debt or through being dependent on a social security benefit, most people find themselves in a situation where if they think about taking action, they will find themselves totally isolated and crushed by a system which has legislation and laws in place which ensures that everybody knows their place. The dilemma is that although a shrinking minority is getting richer and more powerful, the majority of us, irrespective of whether we're in waged employment or self-employed or in small business, are going backwards. The first issue we should be looking at, something which I raise almost on a weekly basis in this YouTube presentation, is who owns this country's natural resources? Theoretically, we own them. Theoretically, it's the Commonwealth of Australia, and everything under the ground belongs to the Commonwealth of Australia. Unfortunately, we have allowed governments at the state and federal level to give away our natural resources to such an extent where Australia, being the second greatest gas producer in the world, now has to buy back gas at inflated prices because no provisions were made for local consumption. we find ourselves in a situation where we're throwing a few tokens through royalties by transnational, multinational corporations which gorge on corporate welfare to develop projects where the major profitability goes to the major shareholders, not to the people in this country, especially First Nations people, who find themselves in a situation where they're forced to negotiate with these corporations for a peppercorn return. And the rest of us are forced by superannuation to become shareholders in these corporations. Why shouldn't this country's natural resources, the wealth, be developed by us through the government of the day? Why shouldn't they be public resources? Many countries across the world, even little old Iraq, resources, their oil resources were in public hands, and there was the coalition of the willing. They became private, but the Iraqi government has wanted and has taken back control of these resources. 50% of people in Iraq today are dependent on the oil industry, which is publicly owned. Today, every mineral resources, every plan for future development is based on a private investment for private profit mantra. Then let's look at the taxation system. We have a taxation system which benefits shareholders, which benefits people who own more than one home. People around the world die laughing when they hear that we have laws in this country where people with more than one home get a tax deduction through a negative gearing. We also don't have a wealth tax in this country. A tax which could be levelled on people who have been able to accumulate wealth. Not just $1 million, but real wealth, tens of millions of dollars. Why have we abolished death duties in this country? Where in many other countries in the world, in the capitalist world, death duties is a mechanism by which the state is able to redistribute wealth. Now these are all concepts which seem to be alien in this country. Concepts which sees people throwing up their hands and saying, you can't do it. There's only one way. Everything else fails. What are you trying to do? You're trying to rock the boat. No, we're not trying to rock the boat. We are trying to turn over the boat. We're not trying to shake the corporate table. We are trying to cut the corporate table's leg so wealth is distributed to all. And to do this is not an individual effort. Individuals can easily be subverted, crushed, marginalised, pushed aside, ignored. But it's much more difficult to ignore people when they come together on a basis of wanting to ensure that wealth is both created and distributed, not in terms of creating profits for faceless corporate CEOs and their major shareholders, but to create profits for the rest of the society. Another simple concept is using 1% of superannuation funds to bankroll, to provide seeding funding for cooperatives and collectives. Nobody gets rich in a cooperative and a collective, but in a cooperative and collective, people's basic needs are met. The type of work that is done can be highly productive and satisfying, unlike working for a corporation or working in a small business environment where you are dependent on the vagaries of an economy which is dominated by corporations. No wonder 90% of small businesses fail within 5 years of being established in this country. And when you walk into a shopping mall, all you see is the same corporate brands over and over and over again. And any small business people looking at this YouTube presentation need to understand that your future is not dependent on the explosion of the corporate world, is not dependent on legislation which removes regulation, but is dependent on ensuring that competition can exist, and competition can't exist in a corporatised society. So you've got a lot to think about this week, especially if you're doing it tough. Because you can do it tough this year and next year till the day you die, and your children can do it tough, and your grandchildren can do it tough. And considering the climate emergency we are all facing, it'll be those with the least which will do it the toughest. Or you can ensure the Commonwealth is used for the common good. The baton is in your hands, not my hands. I'm at the end of my life. You're at the beginning. Think about it. Young people are beginning to stir, burdened by a HECS debt, burdened by a future where their economic situation will go backwards, burdened by increased mental health issues because of the structural problems we have in this country. It's time that people came together and fought this. Whether you join public interest or public interest, not corporate interest or not, is irrelevant. What is relevant that you come together and fight these changes.